Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Thunder, and this is Case Closed. Case Closed. In today's show, we will be talking about the Supreme Court strikes down affirmative action. If you thought that Roe v. Wade wasn't surreal enough, here we go. Affirmative action is the next one to go. And by the way, was affirmative action really even particularly beneficial for black men and boys? No, not for a long time. Maybe for about 5 minutes. And then, of course, Title IX. And now women are minorities. And so 84% of the recipients of affirmative action have been white women. And of course, when they saw that that's the way that this thing was going, rather than making a policy change, making adjustments, accepting a certain criticism associated, they just doubled down. And diversity and inclusion is nothing but affirmative action reborn. Except for this time, with no specific purpose of serving, helping the black community in particular by propping up black men. That was the original purpose of affirmative action, by the way, was laser focus on black men. It's as if they were in some way trying to make up for centuries of well, what do you have? You've got state-sanctioned terror on our financial institutions. Of course, slavery got the whole thing started, right? And then you've got redlining and Jim Crow. You've got segregation. You've got forced integration. Oh my goodness. 94 crime bill, mass incarceration. Super predator, remember that? Goodness. And remember in the beginning of the feminist movement, all of the outright racist sentiments expressed by the founders of the feminist movement, in particular about black men. Because yes, feminism was but the proxy for white supremacy. Yes, I said it. And then as our women black women embraced white feminism, they also embraced it with all of the racism attached and all of the painting black men as being abusive, painting them as being ain't-ish Negroes. Well, this is, it's still unbelievable that affirmative action is about to be a thing of the past. What does that mean for the future? Should affirmative action be a permanent fixture within public policy? What is the appropriate timeline for the sunsetting of affirmative action in institutions of higher learning? Did FBA ADOS males fumble the ball with regards to reaping the benefits of affirmative action? Is affirmative action an effort to an affront to dignity of its beneficiaries? Can a recipient of affirmative action ever be seen as an equal? What are our thoughts about the mismatch theory? Are most people better served by attempting a college that better fits their aptitude and level of preparation, rather than being forced into a highly competitive environment for which they are unprepared? This and more today on Case Closed. Let's go. Warning. Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. What's happening, folks?
What is up? What is up? What is up, Dr. Thunder? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I am doing all right.
And we got LAR in the building. How's that football game going?
I'm taking the food over the game right now.
The food over the game. All right. And so we have someone else. We have, well, it was White Jesus last week. But can you test your microphone, sir, whomever you may be today?
Yeah, can you hear me well, or is it dusty?
Continue. Say one more time.
Can you hear me well?
It might be a problem. I don't know if you, but yeah, seems like you're either don't have a direct kind of microphone deal. But anyways, while you figure out your audio and all that kind of good stuff,
Can you hear
there are
me
many
well now?
things.
Yeah, there we go. That's good.
Yeah, that's good. It's good.
Yep.
You know, there are a few things we can go down the route of with regards to affirmative action, right? And you mentioned a few of them in your intro there, Dr. Thunder. But let's start with the actual case in terms of, for a while now, certain institutions of higher learning, but particularly Harvard, have had the argument that Asians are overrepresented, right? And this is all within the affirmative action kind of rubric, kind of viewpoint, kind of perspective. Because within that perspective, then you talk about representation of different kinds of groups, right? So within that, you say, hey, these people are overrepresented. And the Asians are saying, hey, you guys are discriminating against us, being racist to us, racial segregation, all that kind of stuff, in favor of Blacks and Latinos. Okay. Now, with regard to that case, if you were an Asian American, would you have done that thing? Do they have a point? Let's start with Dr. Thunder. Do they have a point, and would you have brought this case forward in this way to strike that affirmative action because you're Asian? Go ahead, Doctor.
Would I have struck down affirmative action because I'm Asian? Was that the
It's
question?
a particular case. Yeah, the case that they've been brought forward right now. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think I would have, because if I'm producing at a certain level and I'm not getting the reward of that production being passed over by other folks, though myself and folks from my community are producing at a higher level, then it seems to me, and if I'm a citizen, it seems to me that the law should, I mean, I'm paying taxes just like everybody else is. It doesn't seem to be altogether fair to be prioritized, or rather to be pressed down because of the overrepresentation.
So you wouldn't take the tack that, hey, you know what? Perhaps this whole metric of admitting good test takers is perhaps not the only thing. Perhaps, maybe us Asian Americans need to focus more on our extracurricular activities and other skills, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't buy that. You wouldn't go that route at all, or you would not.
Well, the reason I wouldn't go that route is because that's all that stuff is very subjective. This test scores, that's pretty objective. So if I have mastered test taking, and that actually is supposed to be the way that I either get considered for a particular school or not, and then they're passing me over based on some subjective stuff, that seems to be highly problematic. Now, if they redraft what their rules are, and my community is not doing a good job of addressing some of those other factors that they're weighing in, then sure, work on improving at those other skills, right? But if I'm actually demonstrating that I'm establishing what the standard is, my community is establishing what the standard is for taking these tests. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I try to put it on the other foot, as it were, put the shoe on the other foot, it doesn't seem to me to be altogether fair. Mm-hmm. Now, if they change the rules, and then I'm not doing part of what I should do to get considered, then you can point it at me. But if I'm crushing the scores, and then they find some other reason, Yeah.
Makes sense. So, Kaiser, what do you think about it? If you were an Asian American, would you endorse this particular move? Bring this suit, take it to court, escalate it all the way to the Supreme Court, saying basically that Harvard and these higher institutions are discriminating against you. What do you think about it?
Yeah, Shalom. That's a good question. I think in general, me personally, no, because I think relying on external sort of forces in order to allow me to get into certain institutions is kind of failing, especially if you look at why I want to be in Harvard anyways, right? It's like, I want to go there not because I'm going to get great education. Education is education, especially when it's technical, right? If you're studying chemistry or physics, you're going to be learning the same thing. The abstractions, the intuitions, you could sort of explore yourself. So there's nothing special there at Harvard. Maybe connections with the alumni and sort of, pushing myself forward to the next level. But if I'm already high level individual, let's say I'm Asian American and this has happened to me, I'll be thinking ways on how to circumvent this and become the next, person that changes. So personally, no. However, as a group, I think this is the best thing because it's actionable. There is a Supreme Court. There is rules on racism that exist within certain policies, etc., and certain articles, or what you guys call the 1964 thing, right? The things like that are in place, which you can actually invoke for racism and try to get my people. So yes, I agree that I like it. It's actionable, and I think that's the best case scenario for group level mechanics. Personally, though, I wouldn't invoke such a thing. I would focus on improving my own leverage.
100%. LAR, what do you think about this particular case brought forward by the Asian Americans against these higher institutions, saying that you're being discriminated against? Would you have done it? Are you down? What do you think?
I think it's a wake up call for them. Like if I was Asian, I think it'd be a wake up call for me to be the quote unquote model minority, and at the same time supposed to be the smartest, and at the same time they have the what they call the bamboo ceiling, and you know, and now affirmative action, ironically, is gonna lessen your opportunities to get into higher education, even though you're the smartest and the model minority, and it's gonna lessen your opportunities to probably get hired in quote unquote corporate America, and of course go up a ladder as far as I guess management to I don't know upper management or whatever, because you don't see those people there either. I know didn't they have the same issue with Silicon Valley? They're saying we have all the smart people, but nobody's actually running the company. So to me, this would be like it'll be a wake up call as far, and it'll be a question of, okay, so we got blamed for the coronavirus, then they gave us an Asian hate crime bill, and now all of a sudden they're doing affirmative action, and ironically, even though they don't think about it like this, it'll be man, wait a minute, like, well, actually, this bill wasn't even for us in the first place, so why are we complaining about it? But I'm pretty sure they won't look at it that way. So to me, it'll just be a wake up call.
Good analysis here. Everyone here seems to think that they have a point, right? There is a point. There's something a little unfair about it. Dr. Thunder brought up the whole unfairness thing, first of all, and you're kind of now putting it from a, shall I say, subjective lens and saying, hey, I was the model minority and I am supposed to be the smartest, but still, they're throwing it. Now it's something that's against me, right? And what can I do about it? Wake up call. Okay, good point there. And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, okay, the super chat button still works, right? Dr. Thunder, you didn't turn that off on your channel?
No, that's
Oh,
on. Fully
it's
operational.
on. Fully operational. Share the stream though. Click the like button. Participate in the chat. Go ahead and ask your questions and give us your thoughts here on this thing. If you're an Asian American, what do you think about this particular case? But now let's take it into the how long should affirmative action last? Now let's go just be theoretical now and go back to whenever it was instantiated. Justice Sandra, then not Chief Justice, but then Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was asked about affirmative action. Like, okay, someone brought up this obvious question, which is, well, we're going to do this forever, right? Because it's like, hey, if this is supposed to correct something, well, then how long? She said 25 years. 25 years is long past, I believe. And now it's getting sunsetted, if you will. Do you think, how would you have set first of all, do you think should be a permanent thing, or it should be, there should be a timeline? How do you determine, is it just like a hard timeline, like 25 years, or you say, okay, when we've reached this particular goals, blah, blah, blah. What do you think about the permanence or lack thereof of such a policy as affirmative action, Dr. Thunder?
So I did a stream last week on one of my Car Thunder episodes where I was calling out Tucker Carlson and Fox News for their coverage of for one of his monologues last week on Tucker Carlson Tonight, where he was, they were going through the whole affirmative action thing, and how, Asian Americans are the ones that are being disenfranchised the most, and X, Y, and Z. And in the entire time that he talked through this, and this is how you know it was totally disingenuous. I usually like Tucker. I don't like everything he says, but I like that he is particularly anti authoritarian. So he tends to call that stuff out on both sides, as it were. But with this is like a blatant, like, ignorance. Like, it was like acting dumb, because he didn't bring up anything about the fact that really what has screwed up the affirmative action stuff was this Title IX, and how they squeezed in women as a minority. Because the outcome of that is that 84% of the recipients have been white women. It was a program that was supposed to serve black men in particular. That's how it was designed. I mean, I said some things on the monologue to start us off to that point. But instead of us being able to actually receive the benefit of affirmative action, what happened was they pulled a fast one. So 84% of the recipients have been white women, right? So that's that. And the thing is that the second group most well served by affirmative action has been black women, right? So white women, then black women, and then everyone else. And that it's not in keeping with the purposes of affirmative action. And before you say, well, yeah, black women were served, so why you have an issue with it? Yeah, that'd be part of the 16% left.
So you're saying that in your particular, now you haven't said it yet, but what I see here from a kind of a structural point of view, in your particular framework, you would say you would set certain targets. Okay, I'm doing this because black men are underrepresented, and the way that I would mark, this in terms of the taking down of it is when black men have done X, Y, and Z, as opposed to adding other things that lead to the opposite outcomes. Is that part of what you're saying?
If I understand what you're saying, yeah. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, it was designed specifically to serve black men. They pulled a switcheroo on it. And the thing is that my criticism of Tucker was that, if they had just if they had just left it alone the way that it was, and if both parties weren't so totally and thoroughly entrenched with the whole girl power thing, if that wasn't the case, then he would have been able to easily call that out as the problem with the affirmative action stuff, right? Or the policy. All that would have been necessary is for them to keep it for its original intent, and then it would have been very, very easy to justify the existence of affirmative action. You do remember there was a slavery thing. You remember there was this, state-sanctioned terror against the black community. You do know that, 94 crime bill. You do know that, mass incarceration. You do know that black men have had a particular target. We're just going to keep this aspect of this policy in however long it takes before it starts to actually have an impact will be the answer to that. But as soon as they start smuggling in all of this other stuff, then it starts to make it an easy target. Then it starts to look like, hey, hold up here, such and such, and this other person is also getting in over me. I was okay if it was just this one group and we all agreed that we needed to do something to serve that group. But once you start rolling it in for all of this other stuff, then I think you start to have a problem. But anyhow, that's a long way to answer the question. But
Yeah, I think you laid it out rather nicely, and that is that you would have a target. It'd be a target-driven type deal. Like, okay, we will draw down and start sunsetting the program when such and such targets are
right,
being met for such and such groups. and that the intersectional impulse, right from the beginning, you mentioned the power structure too, in terms of whom is not allowed to be criticized. These both parties in on the girl power thing and blah blah blah. That's very true in terms of the Tucker Carlson thing, because he's not an idiot, right? But he's sitting there, and because he can't say that, he can't stop bringing up the woman stuff, Anyways, and SKC has a question here, which I believe it is in line with what we're saying. So, Kaizo, the question here is about the sunsetting of affirmative action. So you could perhaps give 2 words as to, well, would you just have a timeline, or would it be more something target-based, such as what Dr. Thunder said? Because I don't think anyone thinks that it should be a permanent thing. And SKC is asked and saying, okay, hey, that, the accepting of the end of affirmative action as a wake-up call for the ADOS community. Mr. Elia already mentioned the wake-up call for the Asian American community that we talked about earlier. But anyways, the question on the table is permanence of affirmative action. How would you deal with that? And then, and SKC asking this question about, coming to terms with an end of the program for the African American community. Kaizo?
Maybe his power.
Okay, well, Dusty. Anyways, LAR, how would you have structured the affirmative action with regards to its permanence? Is it permanent? Is it temporary? Is it till X, Y, and Z happens? Till the cows come home? What?
Initially, it would have been temporary, but I think because they're getting rid of it, they're going to create a massive, massive cluster, of situations because they didn't implement it properly. So what happens when you stop affirmative action and you hire at the same rates that you was hiring during affirmative action? So it's one thing to say, we're trying to get the underclass Americans or the quote unquote minorities on their feet so they can actually be economically competitive and economically viable. It's another thing to say, that's what we're going to do, but I'm going to give my wife and my daughter this job, though. So now, since that's over with, what are they still going to do? Give their wife and their daughter this job. So affirmative action getting out of the way, what are you going to go from 84% to 99? Ooh, a good 15% jump. What doesn't really matter. So to me, it's just going to create a whole nother situation because I think what they basically did was do a case study on how there will be no equity in the United States of America. And because of the population dynamics and it's dwindling, and white America is supposed to become a minority sooner before later, it looks like just from the top down, you're trying to turn America into South Africa or Central to South America, where the white people who become the minority and they run everything. And I don't know if this country that's gonna work as well. So this is gonna be a interesting, I would say, next 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Interesting indeed. So, Dr. Thunder, you were mentioning the fact that 84% of the recipients of the beneficiaries, if you will, of affirmative action programs have been white women. There's also the aspect of Black women being double minorities. All this has to do with making women also a minority in a landscape where the word minority has cachet and weight and political capital. Then you add all these other people and then you dilute the waters. Okay, so however, what did the FBA mail, or what could they have done in order to make sure, right, that they got the benefits? Perhaps were they busy sleeping with the devil? Both black, maybe white women and anyway.
Stay out of there. Stay out of there. Get out of there.
So what could they have done? Because I want to like if I channel my inner MOT, he would say, hey, like you should have been participating actively in both parties, right? Voting where it matters and such and such and such, and doing things such as the Asian Americans just did, as opposed to putting ice, as opposed to it being the case where there's such a vacuum that Ice Cube has to come forward. And let's let me not victimize that. Be like, oh, why did you bring out Ice Cube? It's like the fact is there's such a vacuum that you what you have is someone like Ice Cube having to come in and say something. So what could the black males have done politically to not lead to this outcome?
Walk away from the Democratic Party. Do it a lot earlier. Stop being so party loyal and start being more policy specific. Whoever it is that you support has to deliver tangibles. Whoever you support has to give you a dollar amount and stick to it. Holding those that we put in political office accountable and penalizing them by casting a vote in a different way the next election cycle every time they don't come through. Every single time. And not just being rather political during national elections, but rather being more engaged in local and state elections. Considering third-party candidates. You know, I mean, there's a long list of things that we could do, we could have done, we should have done, all of that. I am, you know, we're starting to see a lot of that stuff happen now. Now, yeah, it took a long time for that stuff to happen. But I think because of many of the discussions that take place on a regularity in some of the men's spaces, I think that it's causing a sort of ripple effect. You're starting to get to a critical mass of black men. See, look, black men are the new political X factor. If to the extent that black men will vote their interests, the Democrats will not be able to get in office unless they massively change their platform, unless they actually start to deliver tangibles. Do you realize that Ice Cube still has not had his meeting with Biden?
Yeah, I believe Biden promised that. Biden was like, hey, you can't be hitting me right before the election with this stuff, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk afterward. Was that I think they sent Kamala to pass the message on. That was the thing, right?
Yeah, I think that was right after I think it was right after his interview with Cardi B when he told Ice Cube that, by the way. And yeah, you know, WAP, Cardi B, you know, drugging Negroes, sex worker Cardi B. I'm sorry, I'm taking some of LIR's talking points today. All right, I think you get my point there.
Yeah, 100%. So you're saying retreat from the Democrat Party, and you know, not. And you mentioned obviously the Democrat Party is not even meeting with Ice Cube, but and I would have to also reiterate the point that is just obviously symbolic. But even symbolically, they're not doing anything because Ice Cube is not the person to be doing stuff. That just shows that there is a vacuum of power and someone taking responsible charge collectively. I mean, by someone, I mean the collective taking responsible charge and moving the ball forward in ways such as we've seen the Asian Americans do. There was no Asian American Ice Cube, you know, in front saying all this stuff. It was just, okay, court district by court district, appeals court, this ninth district to this, to this, to this, to the Supreme Court, and then you argue and then you get it overturned, right? That type of a deal. Kaiser, I don't know if your audio is back. I doubt it. I think you're lost somewhere deep in East Africa or
No, it's
whatever.
fine.
All right, there you go.
So what happened there for a few minutes? You just decided that, you just don't take questions you don't like, or what?
No, I think maybe I didn't hear. Yeah, maybe you went off the other direction. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now the question on the table is what do you think?
Good. I'm sorry. I just had a thought. Go ahead.
Um, what do you think, right, that Black Americans could have done in order to perhaps not, but Black American men could have done in order to find themselves in this particular position they're in? The position is, hey, affirmative action was instituted for us, at least it was said, or one would think so. And now we did not get the benefits of it. Dr. Thunder has told you how that happened, generally speaking, when it comes to the Title IX aspect of things. I said, hey, MOT will probably come in and say, well, yeah, you didn't do it because you were not organized and you did not work actively in the party. You didn't think strategically. You were perhaps caught in community talk or something like that, or maybe you were sleeping with the devil or whatever it may be. Dr. Thunder said, hey, leave the Democrat Party. That'll be the way to do it. What would be the way? Okay, and you can add your particular kind of that individualistic thing that you mentioned in terms of, hey, why even go this direction? Because SKC is mentioning in the chat that, hey, if someone is passed over, they can sidestep the system and create their own certain types of things. Or you're not going to absorb me into your legal firm, top-notch legal firm in downtown, wherever. Then I'm going to create my own, that kind of a thing. But what could ADO's men, FBA men, what would they have done in order to take advantage of affirmative action better?
Great question. What could they have done? So I guess this question is referring the future focus. So what could they do in a situation like this, which will inevitably, it will happen again. For example, the reparations, once they finally get reparations, etc. How will they utilize that reparations to, build themselves? So it's the same kind of question. Okay. I think first FBA or Black, Americans with ancestry in that nation for, several hundred years. I think the main thing is actually first establishing an order, establishing a clan type structure, because obviously, look, other people, they operate within that sort of clanism mentality, and they're good at it. Like the Chinese do it, or you guys call them Asians. The Indians do it within their little tribes as well, etc. So I think if Black Americans can become an actual clan, right, have elders who are going to go and stand up for them, not Al Sharpton or whoever these people are. A lot of them, these people are swindlers. If they can actually have proper clan elders who care about the longevity of things, so what that basically means is they're going to have to kind of decide to be a real tribe. And I think FBA, not calling themselves that actually helps already, because you're separating yourself from African migrants who recently came in to the country, because a lot of them
All
have
right, all
taken
right. I
advantage
see
of.
three. Go ahead. Inside joke.
Yeah, so the recent Black migrants from Africa have taken a lot of the opportunities that are there, right? And I think for the Black Americans to really do it in the future is to first be organized, as a MOT would say. But it's not just organization; you have to have a leadership. So you can be organized but have aimlessness going on. And I think first of all, the whole idea of a slave
And I want you
morality
to,
mentality.
when you say leadership,
Mhm.
um, you may not have to elaborate further on what I'm about to say, or you may say that you disagree, but it's not the quote unquote FE leadership. It's not the pastor or the
That's
prophet
what I
type
was
leadership, right? You mean a
gonna say.
particular, like a strat, decided from on high, faceless particular engine that decides this is what we're going to do and takes the necessary step to get there, as opposed to, oh, we need somebody speaking from the pulpit or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think yeah, actually, I was gonna say something similar. It's like Black Americans in general need to remove the slave morality mentality, right? It's like you can either be the master or the slave in this sort of Hegelian sort of dance. And I think if they can just truly just say, hey, look, yes, we have uh, we have we have been taken over in the past when we tried to build Black Wall Street et al. However, I think that fear that is driven into people, because I've spoken to some Black Americans, right, who are, let's say, less red pill aware in general. What happened is a lot of them feel like, okay, we've tried it, we've been taken down by, supremacy, and they have this fear, this innate fear of, well, fear, dislike, or distrust, whatever you want to call it, of doing it again. So I think first of all is something that we talked about earlier, is you have to have the spirit of moving forward. Remove slave mentality, remove all these pastors, Al Sharpton, whoever they are, we know all the Islam people, all that stuff, and focus on leadership that actually operates at as you said, as a faceless value level with an understood sort of clan system and structure. So I think, yeah, that will help a lot, and also the spirit of moving forward, because it's a lot of the situation that I keep hearing is people keeps talking about the past, because the future, yes, the future and the past are related, but if you focus on the past more so than the future or the present, then obviously you're now stifling your potential. So I think, yeah, I'll summarize: remove slave morality, start focusing on master morality, move forward and just look forward, and find appropriate leadership that isn't based on, let's say, feelings or
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so LAR, what could have happened? What should be done? Dr. Thunder is saying, hey, get out play at least one party against the other, become more politically organized, generally speaking. Uh, more, more has also been said about leadership and leadership style, that we did not see the face of some particular Asian American, but hey, this thing's in the Supreme Court. How did they get there? Right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Well, LAR, what do you have to say about what can be done, both maybe in the past, you talk about maybe how we can take advantage of affirmative action, we being, FDN, or in the future with regards to other things?
I think the biggest mistake that was made during the civil rights movement and around and the formation of affirmative action was telling America what we wanted to do with the opportunity. Because what wound up happening was, what I see what we're doing differently now, we're just making a demand. We're not telling you, oh, we want this, to do that. Because everything we asked, everything that we said we wanted to do with quote unquote affirmative action or even reparations in the 60s, America systematically destroyed those things from then to where we are now. We wanted to do things with housing, they destroyed it. We wanted to do things with business, they destroyed it. We wanted to do things with farming, they destroyed it. You get what I'm saying? So we wanted to do things with education, that got in the way. Tradesmen, that got in the way. So to what happens now is what you're seeing is Black Americans like, yeah, we just gonna make the demand. Well, what do y'all want to do with it? None of your business, because I'm not telling you. Because the last time I told you, I know what you did. We're the kids and grandkids of the people who everybody was like, oh, we're gonna work together. That's not what happened. So since everybody else was in private and in their homes and in their rooms, like, oh, they told us what they was gonna do, so now this is what we gonna do to jam them up. No more talking. So
Hmm.
it's just gonna be a mystery now. So I
Interesting.
think that's
This
the
is
difference.
yeah, this is a good point. It's not exactly what I'm about to say, but I think it's related. And this is the idea of not focusing on political solutions, not focusing on solutions whereby it requires a partner on the other side, right? To prepare things this way, and then you come in and then because the partner is always able to pull the rug or switch it or intersectionalize it, right? Like say, oh, now it's all minorities or something like that, and now everything happens, and they're like, hey, I didn't do anything, you know. So, and rather than those types of solutions, you just focus on, I guess, the other thing. Typically, they call it economic versus politics, right? But if you could just look at the politics side and say, hey, that kind of thing where you're dependent on a partner, the way you put it, kind of, I'm going to tell you what I need. I want education to be shifted here and this to be done there, blah, blah, blah. And then you wait and you depend on that as the path forward, and then the path disappears every time. Um, I think that's a good point. Good point. But Dr. Thunder, okay, let's go to the aspect that Glenn Lowry always talks about, this dignity question, right? Basically saying that, look, even if we go to a future and we believe, because let's say we believe that the world is inherently unequal. Um, in terms of people are born with different aptitudes, talents, and then there's also different opportunities in terms of how they may and just pure chaos that would affect how they actualize themselves with regards to the training of these skills that they may have, the building of the talent and whatnot, right? So a lot of inequality going on, okay? And let people play the way they play as opposed to putting someone on permanent training wheels. That when someone is on training wheels, right, they lose their dignity. That when somebody is coming in through affirmative action, right, they lose their dignity. So the question, which you asked in the beginning, is affirmative action an affront to the dignity of its recipients? Someone who got affirmative action, or in an environment where affirmative action exists, because they might not even gotten affirmative action, as you mentioned, with your dad, for example, right? But in an environment where affirmative action exists, it can always be kind of used as a. So what do you think about that dignity question? Because Glenn Lowry says, look, it's also an important thing. It's not just, oh, I need representation, but how about the dignity question? And not everybody can deal in the world where it's like, yeah, yes, I'll take the advantage, but I still retain my dignity. We know that that's not how most people are, right? Well, so what do you think about this dignity thing, Dr.
I think that's really important. I remember, conversations with my dad, and yeah, he was considered an affirmative action hire, but my dad has an IQ of 160, and he actually was a member of Mensa. My dad is, and as smart as he is, he's maybe even more hardworking, and industrious and all that kind of thing. He sort of meets the definition of this sort of bootstrapping it. He didn't have a great situation growing up, but he was blessed with intelligence and in particular kind of aptitude, right? So he used that to his advantage. So he gets hired. He takes an entrance exam, scores the highest score in the history of the state, right? But yet every single time he gets a job promotion, the murmuring around the office is, oh, that's just because of affirmative action. It's just because of affirmative action, right? And I remember, and this is several years ago, I don't have political conversations on Facebook anymore because it's a freaking waste of time. But years ago, I think this was might have been the first Barack Obama election, or presidential election, led to him being president. And I was, having I was voicing my issues with affirmative action and basically kind of this dignity thing. And this is a white person. And apparently they went to the website of the institution I work at because they wanted to dig out something that proved that I had benefited somehow from some sort of, race-based or minority-based, preference or something, so that I would shut up about it. And of course, I pointed out how profoundly racist that was. So, are you saying that I can't get the job just based on my qualifications, based on my skill, right? And so, yeah, there is a big. I think that's a valid point. I think it's a valid point. On the other side of that, however, because I would also argue that experience, you're not born with experience, okay? And so one of the ways that they keep certain jobs out of the reach of black folks in particular is, well, you don't have experience. What's your job experience? Well, since you don't have this experience prior, we're not going to hire you. We were really looking for someone that had experience in this particular area. So, well, nobody would hire me in that area. So it has nothing to do with capability. It doesn't have anything to do with, can you do the job? Will you do a good job? It just has to do with, hey, you don't have experience. So no one is born with experience. I do like the idea of hiring folks that are capable, though they haven't had a particular experience. I do like that idea. And to the extent that an aspect of that could be retained, though this affirmative action is going away, I would be a fan of that. But I'm not a fan of hiring folks that, because really the issue with all of this and the diversity and inclusion stuff and everything else, the problem with it is that the folks that are in position whether they could actually do something positive, they're lazy. They're lazy because what they do is they say, well, I can't find any qualified black people. I can't find any qualified black men. So this is why we don't have any black people in our office. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. It turns into that, and it's like, dude, how come when I want to find qualified folks, I have no problem finding black folks? How come I don't have any issue? It's probably because I'm actually looking for black folks. See, when they start doing that, well, we just can't find people, and we need these policies because X, Y, and Z. No, it's because you're lazy. It's because you just want to tighten up your cronies, and you don't want any policies in place that will prevent you from being able to tighten up your cronies. So now you have these policies in place that sound like they're a good thing. They talk a good game, but really all you're doing is just bringing folks in so you can check your boxes and then tighten up your crony anyway. Let's go.
Okay, so Kaiser, Dr. Tony just mentioned here the inherently kind of tribal aspect of things, which is he is in the black tribe. He will be able to find these black people. And in a certain sense, it will be him tightening up his cronies. In other words, him, looking out for his people or his buddies or whatever. And that the people who claim not to be able to find and just basically checking boxes, that this is a tribal thing. So you may want to comment on that, but again, the question really is about affirmative action and the dignity aspect of it. Like if you're a recipient of affirmative action or you even exist at all in an environment where affirmative action exists, that you can be tarnished for this particular thing by people basically saying, hey, you did not deserve this. What are your comments, guys?
Great question again. So I think actually I'm not really a fan of some of these testing mechanisms. I'll give you an example, right? If you want to go into a lot of the tech fields, at least in the UK, I don't mean, when I say tech, I don't mean like software. I mean like let's say science and engineering. You need to do a lot of
You
psychometric
mean
test
real, like real
evaluation.
science, real engineering,
Right,
real
exactly.
technology, unlike what Game Changer does, right? Shout out to Game Changer.
Yeah, real technology, stuff that actually, changes the world. So, yeah, if you want to become any part of that, like the robotics industry, the pharmaceutical industry, et al., etc., engineering and all that stuff, and science, designing the new drug, whatever, COVID stuff, working even for Johnson's and stuff, as part of their product, whatever. You need to do a lot of psychometric test evaluations online, right? These include obviously some sort of personality test, but also IQ based tests. Now, obviously, they are time based as well. Now, obviously, there's so many issues with why that is not good, right? Because it depends on the job you're doing. You might actually need long term, slow thinkers as opposed to fast thinkers who can't really get all the way to the end, or some kind of compromise, etc. So these tests actually don't test for the best people. They do test for specific types of thinking, which might actually benefit the other kinds of people who have been, let's say, the Asians, or even European descendant people who, let's say, have a little bit more discipline from childhood from having kind of played more of these games. Now, what I actually want is them to focus on the outcome of the job. What that means is it's irrelevant if someone is an affirmative action hire, as long as their contribution, like some kind of metric that judges the contribution to the sort of team, it's good, and it's within the average of everybody else. I think if you focus on that, I think that's fine. You're going to find great loads of people. But the issue is they do have this weird. They have a lot of let's say entrance mechanics that I actually think are obsolete. They're not really useful. I'll give you an example, right? You remember Zuhair, right? He had no, he wasn't qualified according to the metrics of the hiring whatever company that he was part of, right? But if you look at XYZ, you choose someone. You don't have to just choose a person with the greatest experience. Choose someone who looks competent, give him a chance, and then let him do what he does. I think having shame on how you got somewhere is irrelevant. At the end of the day, look, if I hire someone, I want them to add value to my company. I don't care where they came from. And in general, at least in the UK, no one really cares where you like what grades you even got at university, as long as you're performing. So I think maybe this is more sort of caught up in these prestigious institutions and stuff where this sort of that's part of the game. So I think it doesn't really matter how you get there.
Mhm.
Can you maintain it? Can you keep up with everybody else, or can you dominate them? The shame is just it's irrelevant, I would say.
So performance, having a good eye to know to spot certain characteristics, and these characteristics tend to be ones that, in other words, to give a silly example, like being able to tell by the way someone constructs their sentences. In other words, the way someone responded to your email. It would be like, let's say, a job request or a job ad, and you said, "Email me X, Y, and Z information," and you can tell certain things, right, by their
Yeah,
response to
you
that
can.
email. How they,
Hmm.
some people you just feel like this is not going to work, right? The way if the person is specific, like boom, 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 like okay, cool. I want to talk to that person. I'm not looking at all. I don't even care about the person's other metrics. I can tell by the way they just answered that email that okay, we were going somewhere here. And if that follows through,
Yeah,
if I see that again in the way they speak and the way they address, I'm like, boom, is it teachable X, Y, Z, or whatever it is, these particular metrics I'm looking for, right? Boom, then they got the job, right? Now, obviously, in the world of and I think that's why you kind of well you did mention places like Johnson and Johnson and so on and so forth. In the world of science and technology, where things are rather objective, through to the world of let's say construction and fixing toilets, for example, those things are very objective. This person is either good at fixing toilets or is not. They're either good at doing root canals and surgery or they're not. In those areas,
yep,
it's rather easy to have these metrics and understand them and hire people. Generally speaking, there are many other places where things are subjective, and one should be always, a little careful when one goes around trying to judge competence, especially by looking at people's ranks in those areas, because rank in politics doesn't really mean anything because it's just backslapping and stuff like that, generally speaking. But anyways, LAR, and there's something also about meritocracy that is rather interesting that I think that perhaps I'll ask you about next round there, Kaiser. But LAR, what do you think about this whole thing about dignity, affirmative action being used, as a shame thing? All overall, in the long run, isn't you do want to remove training wheels, right? Because if you're writing, even if you don't get 13% representation or whatever the right percentage is, depending on the particular percentage of the group you're looking at. Right now, 13% representation of black men, physicists, this, that, the other, that it's not meant to be that way. You're not gonna get Filipinos winning marathons either, right? But just play with what you've got. Let the chips fall where they may. I'd rather not have training wheels at all. What do you think about the whole training wheels and the dignity question, Eliar?
I think it's fine because when it comes to just say Black Americans and affirmative action, the phrase was always last hired, first fired. That was under affirmative action, and I can't speak for quote unquote people of color, but in the private sector, in the public sector, a little bit different because public sector is watched by the government a little more strenuously, but it's a lot of freedom in there. What would normally happen is affirmative action with us was used as a way to either cover up incompetence of other people or blame us for being incompetent. So you'll get hired to a company, put in a department where it's a bad situation, and then when the bottom falls out, it's your fault and we got to let you go. And now, if you made some headway in that bad situation and helped the company, then you stayed. Or it was one of those things where they brought you in because they couldn't find anybody else to replace the people retiring, and you were the cheapest thing available. But they'll bring somebody in who's of another race, say 2 to 5 years in, that doesn't have your experience, and they'll come there for 6 months to a year, get promoted over you, make more money than you, and you have to teach them what's going on. So the interesting thing about the dignity and integrity part is if it didn't come off as, oh, y'all just playing games, then it could be true. Oh, you got hired for
Hmm.
affirmative action. Yeah, I got hired because you effed up so bad they wanted to blame a black guy. Like that's a good chunk of what affirmative action is. Now I can't speak for the other ethnicities, but for us, that's how it's been.
Here, let me
Well put
let me
there.
yeah, let me
Yeah. Super chat.
address the super chat. Thank you very much, Bob, for the support. Ike is right, like tech or engineering. Like, share, comment, subscribe, become a channel member where you'll get access to all archived videos, support black male media. Super chat is enabled. Super thanks for the replay gang. You can also support Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. Spell out the word doctor.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make a little comment here. It's about meritocracy. Meritocracy, generally speaking, most people will say that they're for that. Let me prove my competence, prove my worth, and then the best man gets the job. The best man gets the spoils, whatever it may be. First place, second place, not everybody gets a trophy type stuff. Meritocracy, yeah, we like it. However, there is one particular aspect. There's a kind of a story here, and I think cuts through some of the things that you said, Dr. Thunder, and what Kaizo said, which is, let's say you take a law firm, right? And it's the top law firm in Manhattan. Okay, they do law for Wall Street. Okay, and it'll be like, well, meritocracy is how we hire. You got to go to these top schools and get these top grades. Okay, now if let's say it's surgery or something like that, or many other types of things, okay, sure, whatever. I want the best surgeon to do my heart transplant. Sure. But in many areas, okay, you don't need the top guy that went to Harvard in this crazy competition to actually do this crazy law thing that you're doing over there. Okay. Such that now the meritocracy game is a way of you keeping a particular class in there. In other words, you could get somebody from Arizona State University with a 3.2 GPA to do the job very well. But the only reason you're saying meritocracy, Harvard, this level is because you want the people, there's a particular clique that goes there, right? And I want those people. Okay. So a lot of times, and you guys don't have to respond to this, but a lot of times this is another way in which, the meritocracy seemingly objective parameters, objective standards are used in a way where they don't actually belong. So it's like you're only just saying that people you have to achieve this thing, but it's like you don't actually have to achieve it. And it just so turns out that people who achieve it are of a particular type, right? And you want that type in your law firm. And it's not about doing the job at all. Those standards have nothing to do with doing the job. It's just you, anyways. So, but let's continue on this line here of
Can I say something? I want to respond to uh, LAR's answer,
go ahead.
which I tend to agree with. The only thing that I would change about it is there's such a small percentage of black men that benefited from affirmative action that when that in many situations it's nothing but a freaking uh, it's a caricature, right? It's it's not actually a truism that there has been like all of these black guys that are getting hired that had, less qualifications in, and the their the white person didn't get the job because this underqualified black guy. That whole stuff, that happens such a small percentage at the time because of the fact that 84% of the beneficiaries were white women, right? So that's one thing. To, to provide maybe a little nuance to this also, in my experience or in the conversations I've had with folks, it seems like there's two things that this affirmative action, when it did in such a small percentage of the time relate to black men, they would either use affirmative action to fulfill a quota, and in other words, they don't care if the person is qualified, is good or not. Matter of fact, they would prefer that they be incompetent, then they can get them out of there. And or it's the sort of thing where it shows why. See, this is why affirmative action sucks, because we end up with people like this, working here. But you went out and picked the worst person you could find to try to make that argument. So you have that. And then the other thing is using affirmative action to hire people that you should not be using affirmative action to hire. In other words, people that have like a 160 IQ, that's not an affirmative action hire. That should not be an affirmative action hire. That should just be, this is the person we want regardless as to what they're, what they look like. They should actually use affirmative action for people that there is something about their resume that shows some promise, but there's stuff that's missing. We want to try to give them an opportunity. Go ahead, Eliar.
That's why there are colleges in the United States who have dual programs with other schools, where you graduate from one school, but you can actually get a degree from that says both schools' name. You can get one with the one you went to, and one with the sister school or the brother school, whatever you want to call it, because they figured out a long time ago, and the fact that schools are doing this now. Oh, you won't hire them if they have this school on there, but you will if you have that school on there.
Right.
So even colleges have changed their protocols because of quote unquote affirmative action. And I'll say this and I'm done, my bad. I think the stereotype is that, like Dr. Thunder was talking about having a high IQ, and you and Kes were talking about the high test scores. The people that you wind up working with don't have high IQs or high test scores. So it blows that in the water 9 times out of 10, because if you're black and you walk into a place that's predominantly not black, you run into a lot of people, you like, I know you got a D in lunch. Like, I don't know how you're here. But that happens far too often. Sometimes it's like you talk about a meritocracy. It's really like a nepotocracy, like a nepotism-tocracy, or a network-tocracy.
Right.
Because that beats, America's isn't, the racial divide and economic divide is not necessarily on intellect, but more networking and nepotism. So I'm done.
Yep. Tribalism. Yep.
Indeed, and I hope the AC over here that just came on is not too loud or too disruptive.
No, I
But
can't even hear it.
Dr. Thunder, excellent. So some of you may have heard of the mismatch theory. Basically, the mismatch theory says that, hey, let's take me, for example, okay? I'm pretty good at physics, but if you were to put me in a group with the top physics minds and I'm supposed to go to that school, I will not be able to keep up with the pace of the teaching and the level of competition, because it's no longer about just purely physics. It's about the pace of the teaching, what you're expected to get, how you expected to get it, and the level of competition. And at that point, my physics career and my belief in myself with regards to physics will actually be diminished. As opposed to if I went to Cal Poly, which I went to, a great engineering school in California, people know it, but it's not MIT. Okay. Now, I can go there and blossom as a physics lover and do all kinds of great things with my physics. But if I were forced into MIT and have to compete with these crazy MFers and have to go at that particular pace, I would have thought, hey, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So this is the mismatch theory, saying basically put people, rather than force them, this is how it applies to affirmative action now, right? Affirmative action says, hey, I'm going to make the rules a little more lenient for you so that I can put you in this very highly competitive, fast-paced stuff here with the crazy people in Harvard, right? And then many people end up there, and studies do show that they end up changing their majors. A lot of people who start out, let's say, in the sciences to kind of dial it back a little bit, or they end up not feeling as though they belong, right? They feel ostracized. Besides already, being the whole racial thing going on and your affirmative action person going on, there is the, hey, I'm not ready for this kind of, these guys are crazy up here. And again, it has nothing to do, as Kaiser pointed out, has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to be good at physics. It's just the way these people are playing their quarter and their semester, and it's not, I'm not prepared for that. I'm not built like that. I said, I need to go somewhere else where things are done a little differently, and I will then bloom to be the great physics tree that I will end up being. So that's generally the mismatch theory. Now, what do you think about the mismatch theory, Dr. Thunder? Do you think that people are better served by, hey, just go to the place, go to Arizona State, go to UC San Diego or San Diego State, go there and learn, the stuff at the pace that makes more sense to you, and you actually will do better rather than trying to force yourself to fight with people in Harvard. What is your general take on the mismatch theory, Dr. Thunder?
So it's interesting because I kind of see both sides of this. There's a great bass player named Victor Wooten, and he wrote a book called The Music Lesson. And this book is really good because what it does is it uses this metaphor of language to detail specific aspects of learning music. So one of the things that he says in there is that he talks about jamming with the greats. And in that sense, he's talking about how kids learn language not by being put with a bunch of babbling, kids that are talking at their level. Rather, they're listening to their parents who are experts at the language, right? And so, and they'll say things wrong and use wrong words in a particular context, all that kind of stuff. But they'll learn faster because they're sort of thrown out in the middle, right? As opposed to, putting people that are at the same level. Same thing with musicians, right? One of the reasons that I developed quickly was because my dad always hired musicians to play in my band that were super experienced, the best musicians around, those that were playing circles around me, right? And so because I was in that environment, I had enough aptitude, of course, so that this wouldn't have destroyed me, right? But it actually helped me to excel. So I see that side of it. So the idea of taking someone that maybe didn't test, that their test scores weren't as high, their qualifications weren't quite ready for this, but hey, let's see how they do anyway. I think it would take a special person to be successful that way, but I think it's possible. But then there's the other side of it, which I think you more or less were leaning. I think you were trying to be somewhat unbiased in your sort of illustration, but it's obvious which side that you're on with this. It seems to me that your side of this is more of the put people, um, in a with people that are at a similar level, so then they can sort of, in their own sort of fiefdom, as it were, they can be the they can be the king rat or whatever, um, uh, as opposed to throwing them out in the center of the ocean, and it's like, okay, good luck, that kind of
You know what, Dr.
scenario.
Thunder? Since you've mentioned these two parts of the thesis, antithesis, but let's make a little synthesis layer on top of that.
Okay.
Your particular individual that you talked about that gets thrown into the deep end of the pool, right? That guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who will be a rare individual that then makes it. That is true. It turns out that my own also example of the person who goes to Arizona State and then becomes more successful than the person who goes to Harvard. That is what I'm trying to, by the way, trying to say. Okay. I'm not just saying
Yeah.
go there, and that is also a rare person. Okay. But here's what these two people actually did. The person who went to Arizona State, okay, also took advantage of jamming with the greats, but he didn't jam with the greats in his school, you see, because the school has consequences, right? In the terms of like, hey, because there's a difference between jamming and going to class and taking tests with, right? So this person who goes to Arizona State always has his eyes higher up, right? But his grades are not dependent on that, right? So he's able to go at a particular pace, but he's always reaching higher. He's always watching the greats on YouTube or something like that, right? Or he goes and finds great musicians to jam with, but he's not testing with them, that kind of a thing. So that is actually the synthesis of it. I do 100% believe that you do have to get in the deep pool, okay? But if you don't want your grade, not everybody's ready for their grades to be dependent on it. So in both
Yeah.
senses, it
That's
takes a rare individual to be like, hey, I'm going to go to Arizona State, but still I'm going to make sure that I
yeah.
go and challenge myself in this particular arena. But anyways, I'll let you
Yeah, yeah,
land.
yeah. That's the one difference is the grades. I mean, your grades are depending on what's happening, right? So that's the sort of X factor. That's the thing that sort of makes this a little bit tricky. Um, you know, because I am okay. So the kind of, I mean, I, if I'm prepared, I can take a test. Well, that's not a. I suppose. I never took any of the standardized tests though. Right, I didn't take an ACT or an SAT. I found a way around that, and I also didn't take a GRE. Right, and Dr. Thunder, I actually do have a doctorate. Right, but I didn't take any of the standardized tests to, you know, to do that, and I'm not sure that those standardized tests are particularly valuable. I also have significant questions about the way that we test people, and if that actually relates to a particular level of aptitude, because there's some people that don't necessarily have a lot of aptitude at whatever the skill being imparted, but that they're really good test takers, so they know how to pass a test. They know how to ace a test. Really, acing a test is about telling the teacher exactly what it is that they told you. So it's about reading the room, as it were, and figuring out what it is that you need to say. I mean, you're sort of a people pleaser. The test takers are like people pleasers. If you're not if that's not your tendency, which is not my tendency, then it can be challenging. I tend to be a bit of a space cadet, right? So they're telling me this stuff, but I'm like, in my head, in my imagination, I'm seeing all the ways that this information relates to all of these other abstract things, and it becomes really challenging for me to, like, get that back down into this sort of bite size, answer the question this way, because this is the way that this is what I told you kind of way. So I would agree with that, and I think I've sort of opened up a couple different issues, but yeah, I mean, I take your point. Go ahead.
All right, Kaizo. All right, Kaizo. And ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and keep on clicking that like button. I think we got 34 likes and we got 35 people in the room. Maybe some people in the room right now have not liked it. Go ahead and share it and also drop a super chat, ask a question, make a contribution. Dr. Kaizo over there talking about the idea of the mismatch. Okay, you've heard me kind of describe it. And me and Dr. Thunder kind of put a lot of context to it, with Dr. Thunder's last context being like, hey, with the X factor of making your grades dependent on certain things, maybe you want to go somewhere where it's not so, oh, great, they got to be a great test taker, but still don't forget that you got to swim in the deep ocean and reach for higher heights. It's a way of kind of skirting the system. You go around the system. It's like, no, I don't need to have an MIT degree to make the money I want to make or to have the impact I want to have, that kind of a thing. Because I don't necessarily think that the MIT environment suits me, right? That kind of a thing. I'm more suited somewhere else. So what do you think about it as it relates to affirmative action, right? Because they're saying, hey, you have this black candidate, you let him in by making the system a little bit more lenient on him, and now he's having to compete with all these crazy monsters, right? Whom he's not built for that, as they say. This dusty East African has disappeared again. Oh my god. Anyways, what do you think about this mismatch theory overall?
See, he's gone.
Yeah, I think it's gone. I think it's gone for good. Do you think people belong in? People should be put where in, like, why is everybody trying to go to Harvard? Basically, is the end of it. Is the thing. It's like, dude, like, you actually hurt yourself squeezing into Harvard and feeling like a dumbass.
Hmm. You know what? I think I had a minority college experience, like a minority of people would have my college experience, but I'm gonna use it for this mismatch. You know what? God dog it. Not you gonna really throw the Ashley Larry pitch up there? You threw me off. Um, the miss and you got the mismatch dynamic from my college experience, my high school experience. I got C plus B kind of grades, but I was a person who was sick. And I remember when I got to college, I was playing sports or trying to play sports at the time. By the end of it, I was trying to play sports, living out of my car, paying for school, working. I was up like from Sunday to Thursday straight from working sports and school, and I probably ate like a potato or something like that a day. And that was in my last semester and a half. I took 18 hours, 21 hours, and like 15 to graduate because I was trying to catch up from transferring from one school to the next. And I didn't graduate in 4 years. I graduated in 4.5 because of that. But but I say that to say, what happens with some people is the deep end at the W is different from the deep end in shark infested waters. And some people have comfort that other people don't have to be able to worry about standardized tests and be able to, because it's not necessarily just a poverty thing. Because I've had the teachers who were racist and who took my grades and doctored them up, and you know what I'm saying. I've had all of those experiences. But what winds up happening is life is different for people who are in different places because people cheat. Some people cheat to win, and some people cheat to make sure you lose. So, and I say that as in a sense of since it's Sunday, a sports reference. That's why people get drafted from all kinds of places because you wind up realizing that somebody had to work substantially harder than another person with less to work with and in less comfortable circumstances to excel. And I think that's what happens in America is you have a like, and I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say this, but you have a lot of you have too many failures from Ivy League schools. It doesn't
Yep.
make sense.
Yep.
So it's like Harvard, Yale, Brown, Columbia. you know, I know I'm missing a bunch of places, but Cornell, all of those places, you have quote unquote great minds, and you're like, and people just think these people just disappear into corporate America. But no, there are a lot of people who you're like, what the hell did you? Why the hell did you go here? Like, and I say that in the reference of even Barack Obama.
Mm,
It didn't make it didn't make sense for him to be running for president from those prestigious universities and in his what early 50s or late 40s and still paying student loans. You would think he's so smart, he figured out a way to pay all of this stuff by now. But he had to sell books to do it. So America's a funny place when it comes to this stuff, man. Like you don't, and I hate to say it this way, but truth be told, think about this. Jake Paul was more successful than Barack Obama at the same age. You can put the race into it, you can put whatever you wanted, but it doesn't a lot of times make sense. You
hmm
know,
This
Hey,
is
let
this is
me.
a, this is a great point that you're making, especially for the masses, but also, well, go ahead, Dr. Thunder, because we got
Yeah,
Bob
we've
over
got.
here.
Yeah, Bob has been the sole super chatter with 3 super chats. Here's one of the $5 super chats. Do you think affirmative action would have a big effect on the younger generation, especially people who make money outside of corporate America? Um, Basically, I think the answer is no uh, to that, but we could probably take that around the horn. And then the other question that Bob has, another $5 super chat, does strikes down affirmative action will have a big backlash for people going to college? There is less and less people going to college already. That is true. That is true. Um, I think one of
Mm,
the uh, intended or unintended consequences, whatever you want to say, to a lot of these diversity and inclusion policies and affirmative action and everything is it's done its job at creating a lack of parity in the black community with respect to education. Okay, so you already have an education system that is obviously biased towards women. And the way we know that is because 93% of the 93% of the high school valedictorians and class presidents are female. And unless you think that women are inherently smarter than men, if unless that is what you actually think, not as a troll, but as an actual belief, then uh, then obviously there's something that is stilted in the education system. Okay, so you start off that way, and then in our community, you create all of these particular incentives uh, for the girls to go to college, for the girls to get small business loans, X, Y, and Z, but you don't do any of that stuff for the guys. And I'm an academic. I work at a big university, and and uh, and I see how the numbers have changed even in my tenure, right? How long that I've been at the institution. Since 2004, when I began at the institution, the numbers have declined of black males, and I'm very assertive about recruiting black students in general, black males in particular. And so this just what it is that's necessary to do is just uh, it's just on a different it's on a different sort of plane, a different level. I actually think that affirmative action, the way that it was actually deployed, this 84% white woman beneficiary version of affirmative action, has actually not been particularly beneficial for black people. And if anything, the disproportionate number of black women that have been propped up by diversity and inclusion policies because of this double minority status, that has actually, I believe, done more damage with respect to creating a lack of parity. So, anyhow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point on the education thing. Also, affirmative action has, in a kind of a backwards way, highlighted the question of what exactly is the product that you're getting out of this thing? What is the outcome you're trying to? Because it's like everyone's like, oh, we got to get in here. Oh, well, let's make special lanes for people. Let's do this. Let's do that. Right? Then it forces you to sit back and think like, what am I going to get out of going to Harvard anyways? Right? To LAR's point and to everyone's point, I think as it's been being like, hey, this education thing, one size fits all, cookie cutter type approach. Yeah, LAR made a great thing with the Jake Paul example. And also, I think Andrew Tate makes this case all the time in the sense of this idea of, okay, you follow this cookie cutter path of, you go to college and you do this, da, 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 and then things are going to be rosy. No, it doesn't exist. And you don't have to be some kind of conspiracy theorist to know that this is true. You can just look around you and understand that there are many college graduates that are baristas. It's not even a joke or some kind of a caricature anymore. It just is what it is. Hence, why focus on this educational product? And I think the affirmative action thing also kind of hyper focuses on that. What exactly is everybody fighting for here, right? So, good questions that Bob raised. But we have reached that time where we start landing the plane here. And basically, it's the time for final thoughts. A Hill just dropped $15, Dr. Thunder. She just dropped $15 in the building.
Yes, A Hill.
And yeah.
In the super chat, it's said that all other workers, quit in large numbers. Why do you think, and if this is a phenomenon, what can we learn from it?
Have you heard of the quiet quitting situation? Anyone? I've heard a little bit about it. And the idea basically being that 2020 came around, remote work came around, right? And you have people whom are, they're working from their home. They're supposed to check in and click some button or do something, create some report every week or something like that. And they just some people just automate the system of the check-ins, or some people just quit for a month and a half and nobody really knows whether they've quit or not. I've been sending the emails to Suzette from accounting. The invoices still haven't been sent out. Maybe she'll get to it next week. Oh, maybe blah blah. And here's Suzette. She's gotten like 4 paychecks. She's 4 paychecks in. She's 4 paychecks deep into this quit, and no one knows. So it's a phenomenon that's going on. It's basically, I don't think on the surface level, there's no deep, shall we say, learnings to be gotten from it. There may be some surface level learnings, but because the deep thing is just, of course, human beings. Okay, just given that situation, they're like, you know what? F this, I'm done with it, and I could just leave for whatever and just be quietly get the hell out of here. Nobody knows. Like the phenomenon of taking long lunches and all these other types of they're leaving early, and then now I'm at home and I don't have to I could just disappear for weeks. So there's no deep learning there in that particular regard. However, on the surface, there could be things such as the noticing that people have also now found extra ways of making money. Facebook Marketplace, we know the Shopify, the drop shipping, we know Uber, and all these other types of things. Contract work has gone up. This is some kind of a surface level type of learning, if you will, that we can point out here. So basically what I'm saying is the deep level is just, yeah, that's human nature. Of course, people are going to do that. On the surface, they must be doing something else economically also. And this is partially also why I think the jobs market is so strong, why the job market seems to be kind of resisting this kind of the recession that we're in. But the employment numbers are still quite high. I think it's because of all these ways that people are now finding to make money. But let's start giving final thoughts. Let's start with go ahead.
Yeah, one more thing. Floyd Holt with the $10 Cash App. That's right. Keep YouTube out of my pocket. Let's go.
100%. And yeah, A Hill, that does in other words, the how lucrative is the gig economy overall, right? Um, it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question, especially for people in the West. I know that the gig economy is quite lucrative in terms of if you're able to sell your services remotely from the third world. It's a great thing for a lot of people out there right now, right, that are actually getting paid in dollars. In some of my employees are in Ethiopia, for example. The Ethiopian birr, which is their currency, has just been dropping like a stone for a while. If you can get paid in dollars or pounds, whatever, blah blah blah, and through some banking shenanigans, don't come for me, Mr. IRS. These people can um, actually keep their payments, their income in a stable currency, right? So we know that this gig economy is great for the third world. But how lucrative is it for the people that I said, hey, they're quite quitting, and then they're getting these gig jobs? I know it's what are they getting at? Maybe there's the gig job, there's the quantitative easing and the SBE loans from 2020, but all those chickens are going to come home to roost in the next couple of years. Okay. Plus,
The
also with
shame,
the
blame,
Fed
and
increasing
explain
their rate.
loans.
Pardon me?
The shame, blame, and
Yeah,
explain
yeah.
loans. Yeah.
The shame, blame, and explain loan. That's a good one.
AKA winter
I
is
didn't.
coming loans.
And
Okay.
with all the quantitative tightening also that's happening, I think in the next 2 years that stuff will dry out, and the employment numbers are going to start looking bad again. But that's kind of what the Fed is looking for right now, for them to then start their next round of quantitative easing, where Bitcoin is going to hit 120,000. But that's not financial advice. But I'm dollar cost averaging right now into the crypto markets again. I think when the next round of printing comes through, it's gonna be beautiful. So goes the theory, anyways, Dr. Thunder. But um, let's start giving our closing thoughts here. So LAR, and then to Kaizo if he's still there, and then Dr. Thunder, right? I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here on this. We talked about, generally speaking, we all think that Asian Americans kind of had a point here. It was a wake up call for them. It's going to be a wake up call for the ADOS community because of the ending of affirmative action. We talked about the dignity question. We talked about the mismatch theory and everything, right? Now, closing this particular thing here, what exactly do you think will be the right move going forward if you were to be giving advice to somebody, right? And you can take it from any particular angle, LAR. You're giving advice with regards to somebody that is trying to get into college, someone that's trying to get into the job market, somebody that's trying to become more economically successful. And there's a reason why affirmative action existed. How much of it is still there? How do they maneuver the racism, whether it be perceived or real? I'm opening up the whole floor, the floodgates, LAR. Your closing thoughts, your closing remark with regards to all this.
I'm gonna try to wrap this up with a bow. There was a scandal in California that became the Netflix did a documentary on about rich parents using affirmative action to get their kids in school,
Yeah.
and it blew up in everybody's face. And then moving forward to what you guys were talking about the working from home, the remote working. I know people who got 2 jobs remote working. I know people who quiet quit. And I know people who thought they quiet quit and they got fired and now they're unemployed. And the bulk is the bulk of the people are the latter. I say that to say this with affirmative action. One of the reasons why people could do that in corporate America is because it's assumed that the majority of those people are white. Because that kind of rampant incompetence at work would not fly with any other group. But that's the leeway you kind of have. Because I know a lot of black coworkers or people who are in different industries, they keep dropping off the remote work too. Oh, could you do this? Could you do that? And it's their bosses who have other people working under them they can't find their quote unquote employees under them. So with the affirmative action, this is going to be a prime example of why people were talking about automation getting rid of a lot of jobs. Because if you can't even remote work at home, they're going to get an algorithm to do it. and then what? You know, so affirmative to me, this whole affirmative action thing, just like the Roe versus Wade thing, has to stem from America's broke, and now we're going to hoard together as many resources and try to populate this place the way we can so people can maintain power. But the problem is, this is so far down the rabbit hole, I don't think mathematically they can come out of it no matter what they try to do. But everybody else who's not quote unquote white or a white woman, believe you me, you're screwed. You got to think outside of the box that's outside of the box. So at the end of the day, this is why you see people with all these side hustles. I work, I do social media, I do Uber. You know, you're twerking on OnlyFans. You know, it's you know, it's a whole nother thing. So now,
All in a day's work.
all in days twerk. You know,
Oh
so
goodness.
this is what it is. You know, so now I think even like Asians and Hispanics, they're about to get a rude awakening because it, what happens when you're not you can't be the buffer minority either. Like basically everybody, it's about to be a free for all in American monopoly, where white America feels like we got 3/4 of the board already sold up, or 80% of the board sold up. So what you gonna do? The problem is they've taught incompetence for so long. I don't know if their kids and grandkids can hold on to it. But now I'm done.
Yeah.
Very well put. You're more screwed than you realize, and you're gonna need to think outside the box. All right, you're gonna need to play the money game or the economic game, the well-being game for real. Because, anyways, Kaizo, just for shits and giggles, if you're still there, I doubt you're there. He's not there, is he? No. Okay.
Ashley Larry's there though.
Ashy Larry is there. All right. Yeah, blown away by the dust. Apparently, there's a drought in the northern parts of Kenya. Cows are cheap. I don't know if anybody can take advantage of that. But my previous video before so those 22 cows for the bride price. Okay, you can get a cow now for $5. So that you can stack up, and they're polygamous. These are Maasai people. So you could copy a few ashy foot women right about now in the drought areas. All right, Dr. Thunder. What are your closing thoughts?
Yeah. So, as I was saying in the monologue, if you thought that the Roe v. Wade overturning was surreal, um, though I have been a detractor and a naysayer of affirmative action and diversity and inclusion all these years, um, it is still quite surreal that this is actually happening. And then, of course, what the aftermath is going to be, how long it's going to take for it to be totally dismantled, the impact on all of these diversity and inclusion, um, uh, you know, the in HR at these corporations, in the academy, all these diversity and inclusion um, uh, departments. What's happening? BGS is in the house, and yeah, it's going to be. We're really, yeah, it's going to be some different stuff. Now, I don't see this as a doom and gloom sort of scenario. I actually see this as something that could accompany this sort of critical mass of black men that are walking away from the Democratic Party, that are becoming more policy oriented, that are voting their interest. I actually see this as something that could actually accompany this sort of momentum in a particular direction. So I don't see this as necessarily negative or bad. I haven't seen very many benefits, if any, from these affirmative action policies. In fact, I would argue that affirmative action, diversity, and inclusion has done its part in creating a lack of parity in the black community and worsened all of the dysfunctional components. What's happening, Hoodservatives in here? Yeah, you cats be trying to come in late. I just modded you up, Hoodservative. Yeah, but that's sort of my final thoughts. What are your final thoughts, Ike?
Oh crap! The tables have been turned. Overall, my final thoughts are the rails, right, or the tracks, right? The cookie cutter life is not the way. Okay, that there is no pot of gold at the end of any particular rainbow, whether it be I mean, there's some rainbows where it still makes sense. And if you talk about the Ivy Leagues, it's more of a closed club institution where basically we keep the number low, number of people we let in, and we keep the line very long, like a Studio 54 club model, right? The longer the line of the club right outside, the better, right? So because obviously they could open it up. I mean, technology and these are institutions that have existed for a very long time. As a matter of fact, the fact that the same people are on top of the game in terms of the same Ivy League university are on top of the game and have been on top of the game for the past, I don't know how long, is it a century now or something like that, shows you that this is a market that is not a real market, right? And also, they're playing a club model, an exclusivity club model, as opposed to an education thing. So, although, and also that's one place where there might still be a pot of gold, but you got to understand what the kind of game that is. It's not, oh, if I go there, then I'm guaranteed. It's like, no, if you go there, you meet the right people, right? That's what you're supposed to do in these exclusive clubs. Meet the right people, make the right connections, do the right things that you're supposed to do, and then come out and fly that stuff, right? So my final thoughts are, again, these particular tracks and rails that you're supposed to take mindlessly and then sail into the future with a happy retirement no longer exist at all. So basically, what you need to be doing is every day ask yourself, are my efforts going to result in compounding in the future? Compounding in terms of investing in myself, investing in skills. Is what I'm doing right now going to pay me more in the future? Is what I'm doing right now going to create a system by which I can get more in the future, more leverage in the future, more capital in the future, be able to take advantage or leverage other people's labor in the future? That is basically what it is. So therefore, if you're going to a school, you should be asking, what exactly am I going to be getting out of this? And while in those years in school, what am I building to? So you got to take a more granular and practical, take the bull by its horns with regards to your future, because all those tracks, they're leading you straight to hell. There's nothing. It's a cliff that you're getting on. Those are my final thoughts, Dr. Thunder. So I guess you can take us out.
Well, let's acknowledge the super chat real quick.
Oh crap!
Do you teat and Min Ra? I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but thank you very much for the support. And the other thing is, I do want to mention this. BGS put this down there, so it won't take that long. The question is, do you think white people have truly changed? No. I don't think white people have changed. But I also don't think that affirmative action being in place was some sort of symbol of or some sort of effort at making them change. Because as soon as it went in place, they did the bait and switch so that 84% of the recipients were white women. So I don't see so There's no indication that there was any transformation during the time it was in place. It didn't actually help black people really. Maybe possibly I could argue that it maybe made things worse for us. And then when they take it out, yeah, we already know that they haven't really changed. So anyhow, let's see here. BAGS says that will work for a small number of people. I think he's referring to what it is that you were talking about, Ike.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I happen to
100%.
agree with that. I happen to agree with that. Yeah. All right. Well, that is our time. Thanks everyone for coming in. Please check out the replay, and super thanks. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. Spell out the word doctor. And that is our time. We're out. We'll see you next week. I think we're going to be on Ike's channel. Peace.